Hello everyone, this is the introduction to my second channel that I have titled Lauren Ruth Writes, which also matches my Instagram name. I decided to start the second channel because I currently on my main channel am focused on makeup, particularly Chanel and other types of luxury makeup, and I do want to start incorporating other things into my filming, and that's a little bit difficult when you try to shake things up on the same channel. So I thought that I would just take my stuff over to another space, and this will be a space where I can share things about the books that I'm reading. I can share things about journaling that I love to do, the ways that I love to be creative and in the creative space, and possibly a little bit of vlogging outdoors. So those are the kinds of things you can expect on this channel. It won't always be a sit down like this. It'll sometimes be maybe a sort of flat lay with some of my journals. I've been really big into journaling in the last year and a half, and I have a lot of different types of journals that I love to share. Obviously I have personal journals that I wouldn't share, but I just love to show how I decorate them and how I use them. So I think that is an interesting way to be creative. And also I have been big into buying, borrowing, and collecting a lot of new books, and getting a little bit more into booktube and recommendations specifically around classics. And so I thought I would start out my channel by showing you kind of where I started in my book journey, if that's what you want to call it. I am in my mid-40s, and I grew up in the 1980s and 1990s, and so I started reading when there were options that are in ways more limited and in ways very different from the way that we shop now for books. So the focus of this video will be on my Bantam paperback classics, because this is where I started, and also as an homage to the mass market paperback, which if you've read anything about in recent months is really sort of going by the wayside. So these sort of smaller edition types of books are going away in favor of larger format paperbacks. And these really have given me some joy, and so I wanted to share them. I was very much into the Bantam Classics, and so my journey started at Walden Books. Like I said, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so Walden Books was the bookstore that was at the mall. We spent a lot of time at the mall in my childhood, and Walden Books was where you went. It's where I got all of my Babysitter's Club books when I was a child, and it is where I picked up my first classics when I started to become more into more serious reading, or reading for high school, you know, reading as a teenager, and then trying to find where my joy is in sort of the classics and in or in modern fiction, and I really found it in Edith Wharton. So these are the first books that I want to show. I believe one of the very first books that I ever picked up in this genre from Walden Books was Summer by Edith Wharton. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I read it over the summer when I was 16 years old. I should reread it, and as you can see, I like to, at least back then, I really liked to keep my books in really good condition. But as you can see, this is Summer. What I loved about it was the very sleek design. I know the current Bantam books are a little bit different now. They have a little bit different logo. I think they have a full page photo. They don't sort of have this border and the color blocking, but I love this color blocking. And this is a story that she wrote, one of her shorter stories. It was sort of the companion to Ethan Frome, which was the Winter Story. And this is a Bantam Classic book from August of 1993. Like I said, I think I bought this when I was 15 or 16, so it would have been mid 90s. And it has a copyright or an introduction by Susan Mino, who is an author. I never read the introductions when I was reading these. I will read them now in the newer books that I get because I feel like they are important to understanding the context of the book. But I never read these. I just dove straight into the text. Whether that was right or wrong, it was just how I did it. And this is absolutely one of my favorites. The Bantam Classics. Bantam, back then, I know there's like only two major publishers left. This was Bantam Books, a division of Bantam Doubleday Dell. So even back then, they were, consolidating and becoming one giant book conglomerate. I think everything these days is either Penguin, maybe our Penguin Random House, the same thing now, and then maybe Scribner. I don't even know. I'm not in publishing, but I know there's a lot of, everyone's really into the Penguin classics now, but this is where I started, and these are the books that I really love. The next one, oh, and each one always has like sort of an illustration of like a classic painting. So this one, and they always told you what it was. This one is actually April Love by Arthur Hughes from the Tate Gallery. And this was one of the Pre-Raphaelites, and pretty famous painting by him. If you look in the back, there's like very deep in the back, there is a man holding her hand back there. So the next one is Ethan Frome and Other Short Fiction. I really, really love this one. I know I read Ethan Frome. I'm pretty sure I read everything in here. There is also, so the ones in this are Ethan Frome, The Touchstone, The Last Asset, Xingu, and the other two. And I very much remember reading Xingu. I thought Xingu was hilarious. And this one is with an introduction by Mary Gordon. As you can see, it's a little bit different. It's got more of the full picture in the center with just the border on the top and the bottom. This one is, let's see, Ethan Frome was first published in 1911, The Touchstone in 1900, Last Asset in 1904, Xingu 1911, the other two in 1914. And this Bantam Classic Edition is from April 1987, and the introduction is copyright 1987. Again, I bought this in the mid-90s. And when was Summer written? The Summer was written, I think, in the same time period. Yeah, Summer first appeared as a serial in McClure's in 1917. House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. As you can tell, I'm a huge Edith Wharton fan. I was always a big Edith Wharton fan in my teen years, and she just appealed to me so much more than, say, Jane Austen or one of the Brontes. Not that I don't appreciate them now for everything. They're amazing storytelling, and they're amazing writing, but back then it was really Edith Wharton for me. And The House of Mirth is an amazing story. I don't know, they made a movie of it with Gillian Anderson, and that was a beautifully filmed movie, but I read this first before I saw it. This was this one has a introduction by R.W.B. Lewis, and the cover painting is The Golden Screen by Edmund Tarbell from 1899. And then this printing, second printing, June 1986. So, did I say what Ethan Frome was? I'm sorry, I am running all over the place. So the cover painting of this is by Maurice Cullen, Logging in Winter. But this book, I can't even explain. It is the story of the downfall of a woman in society, in New York society specifically, and it is just devastating and beautiful, and the last line of this book made me cry. So I will always love this book, just because I didn't think a book written this long ago could make me cry. This was written in 1905. I never thought that a book written in 1905 could just make me sob, but this one did. So then we have the most famous one probably from her, The Age of Innocence. This was made a famous Scorsese movie with Daniel Day-Lewis and Winona Ryder and Michelle Pfeiffer. This is from the mid-90s again. The Age of Innocence was published in 1920. I believe it won, did it win the Pulitzer Prize? Yes, it won the Pulitzer Prize. The portrait on the front is Celia's Arbor by Philip Leslie Hale, and the introduction is by Wendy Wasserstein. Really like this one. It is memorable, but it didn't touch me the way that The House of Mirth really did. And it's a wonderful, again, story of Gilded Age New York. If you like, I guess, the show The Gilded Age on HBO, I've heard different things about how good that show is. But that's really sort of, this is the time that she's writing about. She's looking back a little bit further from her current writing time, but she very much grew up in this sort of period and this sort of very strict, society-bound New York. Then finally we have The Custom of the Country. This is kind of like the opposite of The House of Mirth in that it is about an ascent of a woman in New York society, but how that never really makes her very, very happy. But it is about, this was written in 1913. It's supposed to be very scathing I mean, all of her books are either subtly or overtly scathing about New York society. This one is published first in May of 1991. The cover painting is A Lady Viewing Vermeer by Charles Binger. Beautiful cover. And I distinctly remember this one because the main character, she is very much, she's very ambitious, and that's looked on very differently back then than it is now, or that I would look on someone like that is where I'm like, you know, be as ambitious as you want, but she does some very, very underhanded things to get there, and at the end she never really gets the happiness or whatever she thinks is going to make her happy. So in a way it is very much the opposite of The House of Mirth, where you just increasingly feel for Lily Bart as opposed to what I think her name is Undine Sprague, and her rise to New York society. And then some of my other favorites from this collection, and some of the ones that I remember reading the most from this time period. I read this when I was pretty sure when I was 16 or 17. This is Portrait of a Lady by Henry James, one of those deep psychological novels. It took me a very long time to read, but I made it through. I really enjoy the sort of story of the writing and the companionship between Henry James and Edith Wharton. And Henry James is basically an expat. He very much left the United States to go live in Europe, and he wrote Portrait of a Lady in 1881. This Bantam edition is from November of 1983. The cover painting is, of course, by John Singer Sargent. That is Mrs. Wilton Phipps. And the afterword is written by Stephen Koch from 1987. Beautiful cover. I really remember this. I really remember reading this. I really loved Isabel Archer. I remember a lot of this book very distinctly, and Isabel Archer's sort of journey from being an American, moving to England to meet her cousins, and then sort of coming into this inheritance and sort of being preyed on by other people, and how she kind of just has to she gets everything she wants, but then she comes to find out that she already had everything she wanted in sort of one person. And yeah, and it's not really like a criticism of Isabel Archer, it's more a criticism of sort of the way that she is taken advantage of, I think. That's the way I always saw it. But yeah, I always had a lot of sympathy for Isabel Archer, And I was always just sort of, I guess, rooting for her. But it's just a very interesting story about the way women sort of get taken advantage of and are not allowed agency when they, even when they believe they do have agency, even when they think coming into money is going to give them the agency that they want, they really start to get manipulated by other things, especially in this time period. And then Lady Chatterley's Lover. I had to pick this up as a weird, horny teenager because, you know, this was one of those banned books from back then. This is the unexpurgated 1928 Orioli edition, obviously by D.H. Lawrence. I love the teal cover on this, and I love that photo. This is, the preface is by Lawrence Durrell, introduction by Ronald Friedland, and this was first published in 1968 by Bantam and then republished in 1983. So that's where this one's coming from. This one was, you know, as dirty as I was willing to get in my teens, I think. But it is, you know, kind of about an affair between an upper class woman and her gardener. I think he's her gardener. It's been a long time, but it's between classes in the English countryside, and it is, you know, scandalous. And of course, that's what I was reading this for when I was young. So. And then we have The Last Man by Mary Shelley. I have also read Frankenstein. I think I read that in an ebook. And this is one of her lesser known novels. I think it is more well known now since her sort of resurgence and since the resurgence of Frankenstein and all the different editions of that. But this is sort of her dystopian end of the world novel. And it is very much based around Lord Byron and Shelley and portraits of the people that she knew, and then them sort of going through the end of the world plague and going on this sort of long pilgrimage to find a safe space. And let's see, when was this one written? There's an introduction by Marge Percy. This was became a Bantam Classic in 1984, and it was first published in 1826. The portrait is View in the White Mountains by Thomas Cole from 1827, very apropos. I really enjoyed this. I really remember reading this, and it was just very, very singular in a lot of the things that I was reading at the time. Very different from Frankenstein, but also just, it's very evocative of the Alps and sort of that, I guess, Lake Como, that sort of like area where she kind of ran off to with Shelley, and you know, it was a very interesting read. And then I do have two by E.M. Forster. I remember these less, but I remember enjoying them. And I have Room with a View, which was famously one of Helena Bonham Carter's first movies, or one of her first movies. She was very young in it. And this is about, it's an Edwardian social comedy, which is what E.M. Forster wrote about. And this one is Penguin Classic in 1988. It was first published in 1908, and the cover painting is Girls at a Window by Raimundo de Madrazo y Garreta from the Metropolitan Museum of New York. The introduction is from 1988 by Mona Simpson. I very much remember this. It is an English woman, Lucy Honeychurch, and she's in Florence, and she witnesses a murder, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, and sort of the aftermath of that and the ways that she sort of like falls in love with someone else, an Englishman, and then the choices she has to make because of that. I remember the first part of this book very specifically. I remember the end of it gets a little confused with me between this and Howard's End, because it's very much like English garden society, but I remember really enjoying at least the Italian parts of this. Then we have Howard's End, which they kind of like strayed from the formula, which like, I mean, they still have the you know, side cover here with the, in the back with the monocolor, but they kind of made this, and it's not really that big a deal because like the color on the color on in the background of the portrait really matches, so it's not so bad. But I tend to like these style better than these like full color, full page portrait style. I have a couple of other ones that I can show you that are not to my taste, but this one is Ian Forster again. The introduction is by Samuel Hines, and it was first written in first published in 1910. The cover painting is interiored 1915 by Harold Gilman, and the Bantam Classic Edition was first published in November of 1984. I remember this, I do distinctly remember the Merchant in Ivory movie of this with Emma Thompson, and again, I think Helena Bonham Carter, pretty sure. But I remember this more for, I felt like it was less sensational than the movie, but maybe that's just because the movie, there's certain scenes in that movie which really stick out to me. This movie just seemed a lot more this book just seemed a lot more quiet, a lot more about English people sort of negotiating their place in society and dealing with social faux pas and social problems, and you know, it gets messy at the end, but it was a very good read. The wonderful thing about these books that I love as a mass market paperback, and which really lends themselves to, well, you can clearly tell what time period these came from the prices on the spines, but these books all range from between $3.95 and $5.95. So like the biggest, thickest one here, Custom of the Country, no, not even that one. Age of Innocence is $5.95. Custom of the Country, which is a little bit larger, is actually $4.95, and then Summer and Ethan Frome are both $3.95. So these were very affordable. I mean, what was that in the 80s or 90s? I still think that was probably a good chunk of change for a book, but clearly far more affordable than sort of like your Penguin Classics, or like one of those sort of re-editions that Barnes & Noble sells in the hardcover with the gilt edges and the foiling and all that. Certainly mass market, or at least a trade paperback today, is between what, $15 and $20 for some of the ones that I've picked up, usually around $17, $18 for me. And then a few more that I remember distinctly reading. I don't remember a ton about them. Again, this has been a really long time since I've read these. This is Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. I remember reading a lot. I remember going through this, I don't know when, in my 20s or in my teens. This was Ivanhoe, first published in 1819, Bantam Classic, 1988, and the cover painting is the portrait of Alessandro de' Medici. And this was about Sir Walter Scott. You know, he wrote about Scotland and England and sort of this romanticized medieval world. He wrote Rob Roy, which I have a copy of. I'll show you here for something I'll show you later. But he wrote a lot of sort of romanticized Scottish history. And this one is, I think, yeah, Ivanhoe is a Knight Templar, and he is rescued by Robin Hood. And then it's just sort of like, you know, knight in shining armor, finding his lady love, fighting the evil King John. So very much in that tradition, very chivalrous and all of that. It's fun. It's of course of its time, but you know, it is. The female characters are not super well fleshed out, but yeah, it's definitely, you know, it's a fun read if you're into romanticized chivalric fiction. Then we have Dubliners by James Joyce. I read this before really understanding who James Joyce was. Clearly, you know, he's famous as the Irish author of Ulysses, and I've never read Ulysses, and I should do that someday, but I appreciate what he did for literature and the way that he changed things up. But Dubliners is a series of short stories. Weird, because I read this long ago, and I recently, a couple of years ago, went to Dublin for about a couple of weeks, and I didn't. You'd think that something in this would have stood out to me, but I think it's just been so long ago since I read it that I didn't remember sort of anything from this to sort of point me to anywhere in Dublin. But that's neither here nor there. So this was first published in 1914. The cover painting is The Confession by Sir Frank Dixie. And then the Bantam Classic is published in April of 1990. The introduction is by Brenda Maddox. And then The Woman in White, I distinctly remember reading. This is one of those like mysteries, one of the first like mysteries in English literature. Not like the first mystery, but like, I guess, prestige mystery in English. You know, it really was very popular, but also very literary, I guess. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I feel like. And it actually says right here, now a PBS Mystery presentation. If you all remember Mystery, I grew up watching Mystery back in the day on PBS. This is first published in 1860, published by a Bantam Classic in 1985, and the front piece is the famous White Girl or Symphony in White #1 by James McNeill Whistler. There's a preamble, but I don't think there's an introduction. I think they just let Wilkie Collins run. And I remember this. I remember specifically certain parts of it when he's sort of creeping around the old manor house, like on a window ledge or something. It's very striking that I remember that. And yeah, I could probably do a lot of these. I could probably do with a good reread. I just probably wouldn't want to read it from this. I would probably want to get another copy, a more modern copy, and reread it. But I remember this one, very distinct parts of it, and this is just a beautiful cover. The Whistler painting is just beautiful anyway. And then just a few. These are ones that are sort of like my history of classics. All of these Bantam. So I'll start with, and some of these I have read, and most of these, I will say most of these I actually have read. There are a few in here that I never really got through, or I picked them up, but they were too intimidating, I would think. One of the first is the Bhagavad Gita. I did pick this up. I know exactly when I picked this up, because here in the Purgatorio, I have an old Borders receipt. So in addition to Walden Books, I also bought a lot of books at Borders, which has been defunct for several years now. But I have the Borders Books and Music. I bought the Bhagavad Gita, the Canterbury Tales, the Purgatorio, and the Aeneid. I bought them all on the same day for a total of $25. And I bought these on March 7th of 2001. So the day after my 21st birthday, I took myself to Barnes & Noble and bought 4 classic Bantam Classic books. So one of these was the Bhagavad Gita. I don't think I've read through this. I picked it up because of the impact that it has had on a lot of literature, and because of the way it has impacted modern society. It is obviously the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's Counsel in a Time of War, translated and with an introduction and afterword by Barbara Stoller Miller. It is in verse, and I think, for me, I believe the most famous quote in here is the one, at least in reference to my life, the most famous quote that I remember from this is from when Robert Oppenheimer quoted in the aftermath of the first nuclear bomb going off. The afterword in this talks about Henry David Thoreau taking the Bhagavad Gita to Walden Pond with him. So it has certainly had a very big impact on on literature around the world. In addition to that famous quote, I believe it was Oppenheimer quoted the phrase, "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds," in the aftermath of the first atomic bomb going off. That has always really stuck with me. And so again, I've not gone through it and read it. I would love to read a translation with a really good introduction and guide to it. So the first edition of Bantam Classics was from 1986. The cover on this is Krishna in Cosmic Battle, unknown Mughal artist, circa 1590. But yeah, I could definitely see this one was a little bit later when I was buying books, because this small volume is $5.95. So obviously things were getting a little bit more expensive back then, but this is, again, sort of my world classics, you know, part of my sort of world classics and sort of the connections between classic literature, modern literature, and all that. Then I have The Odyssey of Homer. I've had this one forever. I love this green cover against the terracotta pot of Ulysses and the Sirens. He's tied up to the mast, and this is the verse translation by Alan Mendelbaum, so it is very much in verse. And it is, I remember reading this I don't know if I read it all the way through. I know I've read at least parts, and I've been a big fan of Greek myth since I was a kid. And this was first published in this translation is from 1990. The cover photo is Odysseus and the Sirens, a vase, courtesy of the British Museum. And then, obviously, this is older than most things in literature, so it is, I've always loved the story of Odysseus. I've always thought it was a lot more fun than the Iliad, but maybe that's just because I came to this one first, and I really enjoy the way that you can see the evolution of story from the Odyssey to like the Aeneid to Dante's Inferno to modern day. I've sort of always enjoyed seeing that sort of lineage of this type of story. And then another one, I don't think I've read anything out of here. I have read a few of the plays in the past, but I don't know that I've read it specifically out of here. But this is the complete plays of Aristophanes, a Greek playwright. And then he was Athenian citizen, born about 445 BC. He famously wrote Lysistrata, which is famous, almost, I would say it's a feminist play. I don't know that it is feminist, but it is at least one of the more female-centered plays of a Greek comedy, Greek tragedy, Greek theater. And so this contains the Acarnanians, knights, clouds, wasps, peace, birds, Lysistrata, Thesmophoriszezusi, didn't get that right, frogs, Ecclesiasusi, and Plutus. I have definitely read Lysistrata before. This is a Bantam book, published in 1962 by Bantam Classics, reprinted through 1988. Let's see. And there are all different translators in here. Most of them, I think it is either Moses Hadas, B.B. Rogers, R.H. Webb, and Jack Lindsay. And the cover art is Rapt, R-A-P-T, Menad, M-A-E-N-A-D. So Menad, like someone who follows Hephaestus, I believe, or no, not Hephaestus, someone who follows Dionysus. So Rapt Menad, from early 5th century Athenian jar. And if you don't know the story of Lysistrata, it's basically a group of Athenian wives who are tired of being at war all the time and decide to hold out on their husbands until they stop waging war. And it has been very cleverly adapted in modern times. And then we have the Aeneid of Virgil, which is the Roman predecessor, or sorry, not predecessor, the Roman successor to the Iliad and the Odyssey, written by Virgil in homage to Augustus Caesar, to sort of give him that lineage of the Greek sagas, but sort of give it a Roman spin. And this is, again, one of those ones where it has the full portrait on the front, and then the back and side are gold. Again, I don't love this as much, but it does, at least this part at least does match with this part. I don't know why I'm particular about it. I just am. This is also a verse translation by Alan Mendelbaum. So same as the Odyssey, again, it is in verse. First Bantam edition of this was in June of 1961. The cover painting is The View of Carthage with Dido and Aeneas by Claude Lorraine. And yeah, I know I've read it. I read this specifically in college for one of my early classics courses. I don't know that I specifically read this, but I know I wanted a copy of it. And yeah, it's a very, very interesting, follows a lot of the beats of the Iliad and the Odyssey. So it's specifically like the voyage to hell, and the portrayal of women who help them out, and sort of the, but it's basically the founding of Rome, and connecting that to Caesar Augustus as some early propaganda for his reign. Certainly we don't have any of that in the modern day at all. And then moving on to sort of the Middle Ages, we have the Canterbury Tales. I have read some of these stories in here, and I've read some of these stories during high school. I don't know that I've read every single story, but I actually have a bookmark in the middle of The Wife of Bath. So this is, again, in a verse translation. I believe on this side is the Old English, and then on this side is the translated version. So this is the Old English and the translated by Geoffrey Chaucer, selected, edited, and translated by A. Kent Hyatt. I believe he is on the next one that I'm going to show you. Also Constance Hyatt, so don't forget Constance. And this has notes and translations and notes by the editor. This was first published in May of 1964. And then on the cover is The Pilgrimage to Canterbury by Thomas Stothard from 1806 to 1807. It's at the Tate Gallery. I always enjoyed the Canterbury Tales. I think they're very funny. I think there are some parts of it that don't obviously track to today. Some of the stories in there are a bit not ideal, but I think The Wife of Bath was always one that stuck out to me. So, and then we have another one translated by the same, I believe they're a husband and wife team, Constance Hyatt and A. Kent Hyatt. She's actually the one who translated this one. This is Beowulf and Other Old English Poems. So a little bit earlier than the Canterbury Tales, more early England, like pre-England basically. This version was first published in 1967, printed in 1988, and this is the Sutton Hoo ship burial purse lid, which is on the front. We have Beowulf, and what else is in here? A lot of appendixes, a bibliography, and then there are a number of different Old English poems. Like they said, The Dream of the Rood, I remember that one from back in high school. The Seafarer, The Battle of Malton, the Wanderer, The Fight at Finnsburg, Caedmon's Hymn, and Dor. Then moving into sort of more modern times, but still, like, this is the 18th century, so the autobiography and other writings by Benjamin Franklin. I really enjoyed his autobiography. This is written in with an introduction by Peter Shaw, and then the cover painting is by David Martin. I don't know if this was from life or if this is retrospective, but I guess it doesn't really matter. And then this first became a Bantam Classic in 1982, and then printed through 1989. And then in addition to the autobiography, there are the outlines for the biography, his selected newspaper writings, some of his projects, experiments, essays, and excerpts from Poor Richard's Almanac. Then we have one that I remember from my school days. This is The Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I think it's just The Christmas Carol. It's tiny. It's tiny, tiny, tiny. And obviously we have Tiny Tim on the cover. I'm pretty sure this is the first copy I ever read of A Christmas Carol. It's the way that I came to know A Christmas Carol, first published in 1943. And then I think there's like a little biographical sketch of Dickens, and then his reception to reading The Christmas Carol, because it's, you know, Charles Dickens liked to go out and actually tour and read from his books. So this one was first published in at least the biographical sketch was published in 1965. The cover art is Bob Cratchit and Tiny Tim from the Bettman Archive. I don't know if that's from like a newspaper or a serial reprint, a serial publication maybe. And then this has been reissued through like 1996 at least. I definitely had that one in middle school, high school. And then I don't know how I just completely skipped this one when I already showed it to you, but this is Purgatorio from the Divine Comedy of Dante Alighieri. I love the Inferno. I actually have a copy of the Inferno, but it's not in this publisher, not from this publisher. This is a very different style again from the usual Bantam Classics. It's just sort of got a line drawing or an ink drawing on it of Dante and Virgil. And I don't think I've read through this. I know I listened to a podcast that sort of went through the entire Divine Comedy and explained it. The Inferno is amazing, and I've read it a couple of times, but that's, I think, just because the Inferno is inherently more interesting because it's talking about just ridiculous things, where this is getting more into like virtuousness and divine retribution or whatever, you know, and it's getting more into like his love for Beatrice and that kind of stuff. So this is less interesting to me. I still have it. Maybe I will read it someday. Again, translated by Alan Mendelbaum, same person who did the Odyssey and the Aeneid. Obviously written in 1301 in Italy, Florence, I think. And it was translated in 1982. It looks like the drawings are by Barry Moser from the 1980s. That's what I'm getting from here anyway. So I guess these drawings were especially commissioned for this version. This is my copy of the Inferno from college. This is a different imprint, and I'll talk about that in just a second, but I think it's significantly more interesting, and I also just think the Inferno is more quote-unquote fun. I think the Inferno I've always thought the Inferno was much more interesting, or at least entertaining, than the Purgatorio or the Parody. So, but that is also just coming from a younger person's point of view. Maybe that would change rereading them now. Oh, and according to this, Alan Mandelbaum won the National Book Award for his verse translation of the Aeneid of Virgil. So again, he's done a verse translation here. On one side is the original Old Italian, and on the other side is the verse translation. And then on the inside, you do have, for each chapter, I think, and then sort of in between the cantos are these sort of ink drawings, again, by that same artist. Another one I remember from my middle school days, this is The Adventures of Mark Twain. Sorry, not The Adventures of Mark Twain. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. I read this before I ever read Huckleberry Finn. I came to Huckleberry Finn a little bit later in my reading journey. Tom Sawyer was, I think, was assigned for like a summer reading project or something. But I would remember this. I think this is Whistler. The Whistler portrait. No, Winslow Homer. Yeah. So this is the famous Snap the Whip by Winslow Homer. Metropolitan Museum of Art. This was first published in 1876 and first published by Bantam Classics in 1966. And then there's a little trademark in there from Sam S.L. Clemens. Interesting. I remember this one a lot, and you know, it is as controversial today as it was back then. If you have read James by Percival Everett, you know, sort of a very different perspective on this sort of idealized life on the river. And so, but yeah, it's very much from a middle school read for me. And then I have Moby Dick by Herman Melville. And yes, actually I have read this. I got through it. I even got through chapter 2 of just the whales, just talking about whales for chapters and chapter, you know, for a full chapter. And I remember, you know, there's like this one was actually a discarded library book, which is why it has this sort of plastic cover on it. And it actually has discarded on the inside here. And it is written on. And it does have, and I don't even know where I got this one from. It just says discarded from some place in Illinois, some library in Illinois. This is edited and with an introduction by Charles Child Walcott. And again, it is one of those large portrait style. It's actually got a wraparound. There's not like the color blocking at all. And I can't remember if this one had Bartleby in it or not. I know I've read Bartleby the Scriveners. A lot of times they package this with Bartleby, but maybe this one is big enough on its own. I remember it. I remember specifically that long chapter on whales and whale oil for whatever reason. Yeah, I mean, dense, very dense. I don't know that, I mean, I didn't read it for school. I just read it on my own years ago, and I got what I got from it. And then these are ones either I remember reading them, but I don't remember anything about them, or I just didn't get through them. So I have, these are more modern. I think most of these are more modern. Oh, and what was this painting? The cover painting is called Whale Fishery, colored aquatint by Ambroise Louis Garneret, 1783 to 1857. So sort of a rendering of the whale hunting from the time. First edition was copyright 1967, first published in 1851, and then Bantam Classic in 1981. Then, like I said, these ones are kind of the ones that I either couldn't get through them because they're junkers, or I just don't remember very much about them. I can't remember if I read them or not. These two I know I read, I just don't remember a lot about them. This is Main Street by Sinclair Lewis, with an introduction by Morris Dickstein. So this has this copper border on it. Sinclair Lewis, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1930. He's from Minnesota. And this Main Street was first published in 1920. The cover art is The Fruit Vendor by Walter Farndon, collection of Waco, Texas. And then this was first published in 1996 by Bantam. So very much about, let's see. It shattered the sentimental American myth of happy small-town life with the satire of narrow-minded provincialism. I vaguely remember the plot of this one, just vaguely. And then we have Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson. This was published in 1919. It has this is a very famous portrait. This is by Andrew Wilde. It is Christina's World, very famous piece of art. Winesburg, Ohio was first published in 1919. This one is from 1995. The introduction is by Jeffrey Myers. I honestly, I know I read this, but I don't remember anything about it. Sister Carrie by Theodore Dreiser. I'm pretty sure I read this. I don't remember. I don't remember. I don't think I wouldn't have read it. Sister Carrie, first published in 1990. This is the text of the 1900 Doubleday edition. There's editions with Dreiser's emendations from 1907. Let's see. First Bantam edition, October 1958. This is from April of 1992. Cover painting is The Mirror by Thomas Wilmer Dewing from the Freer Gallery in Washington, D.C. It's a beautiful cover. And I don't remember. I was reading a bit of it last night, and I'm like, oh, I should read this again. But again, I would probably get it in a different edition just to have a little bit more context. I don't remember. And then this one, you can see where years and years and years ago I stopped reading. That's not even halfway through. This is Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I have read Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I quote unquote enjoyed it. I guess I didn't hate it. This is first published in 1880, first Bantam edition in 1970. And the translation is from 1970. The front cover painting is by Michael Leonard. It doesn't have a name, apparently, but it is like a very, it's a very Russian background, Russian buildings in the background anyway. I remember reading this and getting just completely lost in all of the different nicknames for people. There are so many naming conventions, so many different names for people. There's the little penguin bookmark that has sort of warped the page that it's been stuck on for the last 20 years. I remember taking this up north to our cottage and reading it, and there are some things that I remember about it. I think I got to the part where they're trying to get one of the brothers out of the quote-unquote clutches of one of the women, and she's laughing at like the betrothed or something. That's as far as I got. How many pages are this? 1,900 and 900 some pages. Again, I should probably get a good, who is this translate? Introduction by Konstantin Mochilsky. Who translated it? Is that who translated it? The translator was Andrew R. McAndrew. There's a note from him in here. But yeah, never got through this one. Maybe someday. Who knows? That is the end of my Bantam mass market paperbacks. I have a few others to show you, just sort of in comparison. Another of the sort of biggest mass market classics publishers back when I was a kid was Signet. And I have a few Signets here. Actually, some of my favorite books. One of my favorite books of all time is the Signet classic, the Sherlock Holmes mysteries. I absolutely adore this cover. This is 22 Stories by Arthur Conan Doyle. It's not like one of his volumes like The Return of Sherlock Holmes or The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. It's just sort of a compendium of different, some of his most famous. So it has A Scandal in Bohemia, The Red-Headed League, The Boscombe Valley Mystery, The Five Orange Pips, The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, Adventure of the Speckled Band, Adventure of the Copper Beeches, The Crooked Man, The Resident Patient, The Greek Interpreter, The Naval Treaty, The Final Problem, The Adventure of the Empty House, The Adventure of the Norwood Builder, The Adventure of the Dancing Men, The Adventure of the Solitary Cyclist, The Adventure of the Six Napoleons, The Adventure of the Priory School, The Musgrave Ritual, The Man with the Twisted Lip, The Adventure of the Second Stain, The Adventure of the Abbey Grange. So this one, Signet Classics were an imprint of Dutton Signet, which was a division of Penguin. So these are Penguin. Eventually, I don't even know if Signet exists today, but this was sort of Penguin's version of the Bantam Classics. And if I couldn't get a Bantam Classic, which I preferred, I would always get a Signet Classic because they had sort of the same idea. They had the classical portraiture, or at least the portrait on the front, and they were just portable. That's the appeal of mass market paperbacks, is that they're portable and they are cheap, and not in a bad way. This one was $4.95, and there's a little picture of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle on the inside, and then the introduction is copyright 1984. The cover painting is from 1887. Prince's Dock in Hull by Atkinson Grimshaw. Yeah, I've read this many times. I love this version of the Sherlock Holmes stories. Another one of my favorites from childhood is The Phantom of the Opera. I think I've only read this once. I've seen the movie, the old movie, several times. The Claude Rains and the original silent movie I've seen several times. I love The Phantom of the Opera. I actually got to go see the Palais Garnier, the opera house depicted on here, in 2018 when I went to Paris. So that was I spent hours in the Palais Garnier, and this one was $4.95, The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Introduction by Max Bird. This one is from... the copyright for the introduction is 1987. It doesn't really say if this is a painting. I'm assuming this is just like a colored photograph or something, a rendering of the staircase at the Opera Garnier. We have The Glimpses of the Moon by Edith Wharton. I know that Pushkin Press has done a edition of this. I think I would like to get it and maybe reread this. This is a beautiful cover. This was a very interesting story. I have read through most of Edith Wharton's. I have, over on this bookshelf over here that you can't see, there are a bunch of trade paperbacks. When I was in my 20s, I read almost all of Edith Wharton's books. I have not read her nonfiction. I've read a few of her, well, I've read a few of her memoirs, but I've not read her big biographical. I've never read The Buccaneers because that was unfinished, and I think there's things here and there from her that I haven't read, but I've read quite a bit of her oeuvre, or her quite a bit of her catalog. So this is with an introduction by Regina Barreca and a selected bibliography. This version is from 2000, so getting into my 20s again. Probably something I bought at Borders. And then it doesn't say, this is a Swedish, I'm assuming it's from like maybe the 1900s. There was famously Scandinavian painting in the turn of the last century, is very much in this mode and very much popular. So this is The Glimpses of the Moon. I know it's got a couple. I don't remember much about it. Again, I probably want to get the Pushkin Press edition. Sir Walter Scott, Rob Roy, the Signet Classic. This one, I believe this one came out, well, the book came out. I bought this around the time that the movie came out with Liam Neeson and Jessica Lange. I never saw the movie, but I did read the book. This is famously about sort of the Highlands in Scotland. This is from 1817, one of his Waverley books, and again, it's just talking about the glorious Scottish past, and I can't remember. It's about the struggles on the borderlands between England and Scotland. I guess that's not the Highlands. I feel like I remember this story, and Rob Roy wasn't in like half of it. He just kind of shows up at some point in the middle of the book. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I kind of remember about this. Yeah, this is printed in 1995 again, and then what's on the back? The cover painting is A Stormy Highland Scene, so by Alexander Naismith. So, and then again, I have my copy of The Inferno. This was translated by John Ciardi. And this one is pretty, this one doesn't have the Italian on it. I did like this translation in verse. I thought it was very good. Again, I remember reading this. This is the one I specifically bought for my classics course in college when I was a freshman. But this is a mentor book, which is a Signet, like a division of Signet or a branch of Signet at the time. So it is a Signet classic, but it is a mentor. I don't know what the difference is. I don't know what imprints on imprints on imprint. I'm not in the publishing world. I think the cover is very, very cool. It is, I really like the Inferno. I recently read R.F. Kuang's Catabasis, which is about a descent to hell. So it didn't have a ton to do with Dante Alighieri's The Inferno, but there were references to it. But it did reference a lot of mythos about the underworld. It wasn't just about Dante's version of the underworld. This was copyright 1954 by John Ciardi, and then 1982. It doesn't say in here where the artwork is, but if you can see, it's like this ink blot, you know? Someone just dropped ink and then folded the paper, and then, you know, you're just like, you're seeing whatever you want to see in it. So I thought it was very cool. It's just very, very creepy. But I don't see anything on here about an attribution for this piece of art. It's just super cool. And then one of the things I love about old mass market paperbacks is that either in the front or the back you have a listing of other books, and then it says you can either buy it at your bookstore or you could just cut this out and send this in, and you just send a check in with all the ones you checked out that you want. So you could just do, it was back in the days when mail order was still a thing, and I think that's great. A lot of these have that. Yeah, so like Bantam would have these as well. You'd have your sort of checklist of the major authors. You have Jack London, Edgar Allan Poe, Mark Twain, Stephen. So if you liked, assuming that you are into Mark Twain, they're sort of assuming you would be into like Jack London and Stephen Crane, and then they'd sort of give you a list, and you just like, you know, cut this out of your book, send it in, and then of course there's more on the back. Alexander Dumas, James Fenimore Cooper, Daniel Defoe, more Jack London. What would the Purgatorio have? Anything? Yeah, so the Purgatorio has Dostoevsky, Alexander Dumas, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, and Jules Verne. That's fun. James Joyce, George Bernard Shaw, Oscar Wilde, the Brontes, Charles Dickens, Henry James, again Jules Verne. That's a pretty common one. And then Charles Dickens, The Christmas Carol has Louisa May Alcott, E.M. Forster, Thomas Hardy, Henry James, James Joyce, Rudyard Kipling, D.H. Lawrence. That is quite the lineup. And then more for children, or more aimed at children, Frances Hodgson Burnett, Lewis Carroll, Kenneth Grahame, Brothers Grimm, Jack London, Jules Verne, Johann Wyss, Swiss Family Robinson. Just kind of, I don't know, I think it's fun. And this was my early classics reading history. And again, just sort of an ode to the old mass market paperback. The mass market paperback is apparently now going by the wayside, and that's a little bit sad because, you know, these were easy to carry around. They were not, I mean, they're cheap, but then I don't think of them as like cheap in the bad sense. I think that they're just, you can see mine are, these are 20 years old and they're yellowed and they've aged, but the spines are all mostly good. Like I said, back in the day, I never cracked my spines, and I would feel like that was just a really bad thing if any of my spines cracked. I was very persnickety about my books. I am less so now, just because I feel like if they do have flaws, that's just what makes them mine. And yeah, I always enjoyed seeing the different classical sort of artworks and paintings, and the way that what they chose for each book, how they sort of curated the paintings, and how they did the translations. Again, I didn't read a lot of the introductions to these just because I was eager just to dive into the text. And of course, you know, when you're 20, you're in your teens and 20s, of course you innately understand things, and nobody can tell you anything, and you don't need someone else's interpretation to tell you what the book says, right? You can read for yourself. Yeah, I feel a little bit differently about that now, but that was how I read back then. So I hope you enjoyed this little tour of my Bantam Classics editions. And I hope that you would like to join me here on my little corner of Lauren Ruth Writes, and come with me to see how I read, how I write, how I travel, and how I just am creative or relaxing or just being me. So that's what this channel should be about, and something new and something different. And if you're willing to join me, please subscribe or give a like or any of those wonderful things that YouTube wants you to do now, which I don't know what that is anymore. But anyway, welcome. And if you're interested to hear more about books that I'm into and more about what I'm journaling about and where I'm going, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.